It's about bringing more members into the UN Security Council, which in our view is not the answer to issues confronting the United Nations and its organs. So UNEP has a responsibility to put a position paper in respect to the restructuring of UNEP in order for it to be better positioned to implement some of the actions. So my very short response to your question, sir, is that we need to take political action and diplomatic action to draw greater attention to our concerns.
But the next question will be, can we afford to wait the UN reform and the UN Security Council reform or the UN General Assembly reform? I understood that it's interesting that the point you're making is that maybe your last weapon is the fact that you have one vote in the General Assembly at the UN, just like China, just like South Korea, you have one vote, you count as much as all the other countries, despite the fact that you're a small island country. And my question will be, do we have the time? Can we afford to wait for that? And we have the feeling that there's a sentiment of urgency coping with this problem. And the problem is, from where is going to come the money with all this financial crisis, the sovereign debt crisis? How do we make that, for example, certain of sovereign funds can invest in green economy? Maybe Mr. Shin has an idea on that, how to raise the money?
Well, there are many discussions about the financing for development. For example, as we know where France is one of the leading countries for innovative financing for development. There are lots of mechanisms using the market. We have a huge capital market in the world, so there are many ideas, and the ideas, some ideas were already implemented in the market, such as IFFI or other mechanism, or the solidarity fund for using the imposing tax whenever you travel using the flight. For example, the Korea, we impose $1 everyone who used the flight from Korea. So those kind of money could be contribute to the MDG activities, including the environmental sustainability. So those ideas, maybe there are some limits, especially given the these days economic downturn. So certainly there is some limit in the mobilizing ODA. So we could use the innovative financing while using the market, the private sector. So we should be more flexible for mobilizing the financing for climate challenges.
Thank you. Does anyone want to react before we conclude the panel? Yes, Mr. Adam.
I would just like to comment, to add on what has just been said by the Prime Minister of Dominica and on the ambassador from Korea. I think that we do need, first of all, reform the UN. And that, you have mentioned the problem of time. The issue as well is that we have, in a sense, identified the problems. The science, for example, in terms of climate change, the science is there. The science is, I would say, almost undisputed. But we allow a debate to go on, which is essentially ideological rather than being about the science. This is where the media has a very strong role to play as well. We should go back to the science. It is clear that this is the issue, and now we need to prioritize the actions. The problem with the prioritizing of actions is that the UN currently is not equipped to say absolutely, this is the way to go. As Mr. Kante said, the UN is the sum of the decisions of member states. So we need to have a mechanism within the UN where you can say, this is the action which the science dictates, and we move forward. I agree with the ambassador for Korea as well that there is a huge economic opportunity which is linked in terms of the actions that need to be taken. the investment that is required in the technology for green growth can allow new markets to develop, can allow new investment opportunities. But the problem is that all of our economies, I make no exception, I think the world, all economies in the world, are structured today around oil. They are structured so that oil, any economist will tell you, if you want to produce 1 megawatt of electricity, an oil generator will do it more efficiently than renewable energy. Despite the fact that the technology exists, but the technology is not linked to the financing, it's not linked to the investment, and it's not linked to the private sector sufficiently. And this is again where you go back to the main question of how do you govern at the global level. You need strong governance structures that establish this. In terms of the adaptation funds, we're still talking about World Bank doing this, about individual countries doing that. We are not talking about one fund that is there to deal with this issue. And that is one of the key things that we can move fast on it. In fact, theoretically, we've already taken a decision. There's supposed to be an adaptation fund, but the funds are still trickling left, right, and center, not going through one direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kante?
Chair, I think developing countries have to waken up, and if someone tells you today that I will help you to be successful, that person is lying. Only you can make yourself successful. Aid has never, ever helped any country in the history to be developed. It doesn't exist. Aid has never, ever helped any country to be developed. I take the example of one country I love very much, Malaysia. Malaysia, over the last 50 years, has had a steady GDP growth. And they are saying by 2020, in 8 years, they will be a developed country. But they have not counted on aid to reach this level. I think you have all the developing countries, we have the means, fantastic means in our hands to be developed. The North have exhausted their natural resources. You still have your natural resources, be it blue, be it green. The biodiversity is huge, and that will be the next catastrophe which will come in addition to climate change. I strongly believe that the South-South cooperation is a wonderful tool for developing countries to get together and get something meaningful, much more meaningful than asking from the North to give us the resources we need. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kante, and I'd like to thank you all for participating to this panel today. I'd like to thank the audience for being there this morning. And by the way, I shall remind you that we have an interesting panel I shall moderate tomorrow afternoon on the Security Council reform. Thank you very much to all, and have a nice continuation here at the MEDays in Tangier. Thank you.